Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's PMI Friday webinar, How to Tell Effective Stories Using Graphs in a Virtual Environment, with the fabulous Dennis Crommentuijn-Marsh. My name is Susanna Clark. I'm going to be facilitating the session today, and that also includes running all the Q&A desk. So we're going to be using that throughout today. You can find the Q&A and the chat buttons on your Zoom control panel. Please do keep your questions coming. Any comments you have, any observations, I will put them to Dennis. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we're going to send you a link via email early next week. So that will have the full recording of everything you're going to hear today and everything you're going to see today. As usual, we're also broadcasting live on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So to those of you who are joining us on those live streams, welcome. In future, if you want to participate in any of our polls, or if you'd also like to receive the recording, then please do register for our webinars on pmi.co.uk/webinars. At the end of today, we will send all registered participants a short Voice of the Customer survey. We'd be really grateful for your feedback and also, in particular, your suggestions for future webinars, any topics that you'd like us to cover. We do listen to you and we do feed your suggestions into our scheduling plan. Finally, from me before we get underway, we've been running these webinars every week now for almost a year, and they're really aimed to support our clients and also our fellow industry practitioners in these difficult times. We're very conscious that some people are currently not in work. So we're offering our support in the form of a free CV and profile review service. If you email us at team@pmi.co.uk, we'd be delighted to give you some feedback and any opportunities that we can see to enhance it. Several of you have taken advantage of this service, and it's been great to see the results you've achieved. Thank you for all your continued support, and now I'd like to hand over to Dennis.
Suze, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. From wherever you are in the world, we have people here from all 4 quarters of the globe, so welcome to everyone. Lovely that you're with us here this afternoon. So like Suze says, my name is Dennis Crommentuijn-Marsh, and I'm a director consultant with PMI. 15 years now, can you believe it? And I'm also head of data analytics and insights. And that's, of course, a topic we're going to talk about today. How do you use these 3 disciplines to tell stories using graphs? So I'm going to first talk about some design principles for good graphs. And it's the absolute basics, but I want to make sure we get these basics across very well and very clean. And then we're going to talk about telling stories using those graphs, and also which ones not to use. And by the way, that's a personal preference. You, of course, may have a completely different view on this, and I always welcome to see your views in the chat window. And by the end of this hour, there'll be a free infographic for you to download, which contains 4 pages with a summary of what I cover in this hour. So you've got something to take away, and feel free then to share it around with your colleagues. Now, Dalebot, he always has a classic view on these things. And if you read some of these text boxes, you may recognize some of them. And again, if you stick into the chat window, what is that somebody asks you always about graphs? We'd love to see your comments here, what you get as a response when you present something. Now, over the last 6 months particularly, I've been very fortunate to work with a lovely, lovely client, and probably every day I've seen a dashboard of some sort in the virtual COVID environment, so distance working. And every single time I see something and I listen to the voice of the customer, and these are some of the messages that come through. Yeah, I want the graph to be simple. It needs to tell a clear message. The graphs on my virtual dashboard, they all look different. Can we make them look the same, please? There's lots of graphs, but I don't understand any of them. Or this one, yeah, fantastic graph. It's actually not answering the question I've got. And then the last one, of course, I want them all to be digital. So we've now moved from the physical, having it on the whiteboard, having it on the wall of the office, into the virtual. So I'm going to give you a challenge. So instead of doing a poll this week, I would like you to start typing in some answers. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to describe a scene, and Susan's going to help me with the answers that you will type into the chat box. Let's see how fast you are in recognizing what scene I am describing. It's a single scene, it's a picture, and answer into the chat window. So first of all, number one. I am far away from a populated area, and I do not see many man-made objects. Where am I?
Okay, so we've got people starting to submit their suggestions. Are you on the moon, Dennis? Are you on a desert island? Are you out in the countryside, somewhere in space? Space seems to have a, definitely people are feeling the space option, definitely.
Good. Forrest, thank you very much. Number two. In this scene, in popular science, I see something else. They refer to it as having only 7 colors, which is not quite true, and mostly in a semicircular fashion, although you can get full circle versions too in the right conditions. Folklore states that at the end of it, you'll find a pot of gold. In this case, in this particular image, it's a very strong one, and above it, a slightly lighter one.
So that's a very consistent, everyone thinks you're either you can see a rainbow, or I've even had a double rainbow.
There we go, 10 points to that person. In the foreground is a green material which covers the ground.
Place your answers, please. What's that green material that's covering the ground? Is it a lawn? Is it somebody's field? Are we on grass? Is it golf? Is it a golf course?
Fantastic.
Even AstroTurf, we're back to the moon.
In the middle is a mammal with its upper extremities raised upwards. The ends of the extremities are not covered, but the upper part of its body is covered in a red synthetic material which is waterproof, and a black covering for the lower extremities for modesty, warmth, and protection.
Oh, there's some hesitation there. Oh, is it a dog? Is it Paddington Bear? Perhaps some kind of human? Dragon? Is it a horse? I'm thinking of a horse in a nice red blanket there. Possibly a boxer?
Excellent.
Lots of variety here. It's great.
Ooh. In the background is also a green material, but looks different from the material in the foreground. It's much taller in height. The height varies throughout the picture. And I will continue to the last few points. And above the green material is a blue color, but the blue is not consistent blue. There are some different shades of gray visible, with different pattern and texture from the blue.
So Red Riding Hood is featured, and Teletubbies. Goodness me, that seems a long time ago. I'll leave you to it, Dennis. Thank you very much, everybody, for your input, and love your ideas and creativity.
Right, Stuart, I think you've got it, and thank you for all the others with the suggestions as well. So yeah, this scene. So now I'm going to show you, of course, the scene. How quickly can you describe what you see? Is there anything you spot I did not describe, of course, on the previous page, or is there anything I described you didn't see? So here we go. Yeah. So I think somebody, Jane said Rambler. Yeah, so 10 points. Rambling in the countryside. Huh? So yeah. Yeah, fantastic. So the moral of the story here is, of course, the picture tells you 1,000 words. We can tell a lovely story just by looking at this picture. That's what it's all about today. So I want to move to the random drawing again. Yes, absolutely. Well spotted, Chiara and Dawn. So design principles for graphs. The first thing to always reflect on is the question, what are you trying to accomplish? So what is the purpose of the graph? Then the second element is, what's the quality of the source data that you're going to use? Where is it stored? Is it in a database, in Excel, ERP system, or is it on pieces of paper? Who is the audience? And what do they expect and want? Now, this is a critical question. Every single time I'm seeing a dashboard, I ask, have you spoken to the audience, the customer of the dashboard, and asked them? And then another question I always ask is, Tell me the typical questions they are asking about your graph when you present it at the end of the month. So there's a top tip. Go and ask those questions. And then the last element, of course, the creator of the graph. It could be you've only got one creator in the organization, or you may have many creators. Now, if you have many creators, of course, you may need a dashboard coordinator who then pulls all these graphs in from various places into this single dashboard. Now, for all of them, so the creator and the audience, what is their experience creating graphs, but also understanding the message from the graph? For example, I'm going to talk about run chart versus control chart. And some organizations, they do not know what a control chart means. So we have to go through some education with them first before we can show them a control chart. So think about this trinity here. Then the second element, and a different lens to go through, is about the difference between an explanatory graph and an exploratory graph. And this is one you really, after this webinar today, go and look at the last graph you created in a report or on your dashboard to ask yourself this question. If it's an explanatory graph, then actually you know what the answer is that you want to share with your audience, and therefore the graph is helping you to convey that message in a graphical format. So often that type of graph is very simple. There'll be a single KPI, a single line, a single color, a single entity. An exploratory graph, however, is a graph that we use when we do not know the answer to the question, and we want to have the graphs help to explore together what the answer could be. And there's many diagnostic packages which major on that. The one that jumps to mind is called JUMP, JMP, which is really good at that. I've got lots of questions, don't know the answer, lots of data. Let's go and slice and dice it in different graphs. Power BI can do that these days as well. Now, these graphs often tend to be more complex. And then we've got the hybrid in the Venn diagram, the bit in the middle. And I love the title of this, the exploratory explanation. Dual purpose. And these I see the most. But I see these the most, not because people made the assessment, is it explanatory or exploratory, but because we could create the graph in Power BI, Tableau, JUMP, etc. And the question always is this the right graph to tell the story effectively? So have a reflection on that on your graphs. So 3 key design principles. First of all, design principle number 1. If the graph is simple, keep it simple. If the graph is complex, make it simple. And this comes back to also something which is referred to as Toyota Kata. Do what you do really well. Become very effective at it and keep it simple. I had a person coming to me the other day who said, Dennis, this graph you just showed, that's just so old-fashioned. We can do far more snazzy things. So yeah, of course we can do more snazzy things, but is it telling the message in a clear and concise manner? And the answer is no. So keep things simple. Second design principle, for the largest number of people, providing the greatest degree of understanding with the least amount of effort. So you do not want to be in a situation where every single time you present something to somebody else, somebody says, can you just tell me what this graph means? What's the title? What's in the x-axis? How do I interpret now the picture in the middle? All the time could actually be used to explore, to explain, to digest, to make decisions. And the third design principle, make sure the graph tells a story. And the story literally is once upon a time. Yeah? We had an x-axis and a y-axis. We tried to understand the relationship between the two. Was there a relationship, yes or no? And if there was a relationship, is this a useful thing to know? So by that kind of dialogue, we then start to engage with our audience. We therefore start to engage their thinking, and therefore we start to drive insight. So remember those 3 design principles, which you also find on the infographic at the end, by the way. So with every KPI you display, we need to make sure that our audience has a shared understanding. Pizza is always my classic, yeah? I like it hot. Now, what do I mean? Temperature or spiciness as one example of that on a pizza, yeah? So what we need is an explanation in words. We need a unit of measure. Degrees Celsius, of course, here in a civilized country. We use Celsius, like all of you, of course. Yeah. KPI owner. Who owns this KPI? Who looks after it? And also, who created, who does the steering of that data and the graph updating? So if you have more than one person, make sure they are named. The calculation formula. So how is this thing be calculated, especially if you have more complicated KPIs you're looking at, which are ratios or multiplications. Make sure people understand what sits behind it. If you have a target, make sure then also is described what the target means. Target, by the way, is not always necessary, but lots of organizations do use targets. The steering effect, how will this KPI help? What are the risks and assumptions in the creation of the initial data? Perhaps we had a quality issue or liability issue, a small sample size. Or we have to make some assumptions around this data, perhaps if it's also subjective data. What is the impact if you don't meet the target? So again, red or green kind of status. The so what? How often do you report the KPI? Daily, weekly, monthly? And the last one, where is the original data, but also the analyzed data? Is it the same database? Are we pulling it straight into our graphical design package? Excel, Tableau, Jump, Power BI, or otherwise? Or do we have a stepping stone in an intermediate system to pull it all together? So make sure this is key. And almost, what I always find is, I sometimes now you see a graphs and the senior leader says, I like the graph, but what does it mean? And then we go back to, was that KPI? Was it operationally defined? They say, not quite. So work through that. Now, the basics of every graph. You may have come across this in primary, secondary, university, but I still see to this days working professionals missing out on the basics. So graph, titles, values, colors, traffic light, if you have one, and legend. Legend. So first of all, graph. Keep the graph simple. And for time series, always include historical data. And if you have like a slider, which you can have in Power BI, for example, get that slider in there. Header title full, include the KPI name and avoid using acronyms. Assume the audience knows nothing. It actually helps with the storytelling. Unit of measure. If there's a unit of measure, add it to it. Is it dollars? Is it pounds? Is it euros? Is it lira? Whatever. X-axis and Y-axis again. Add into this. Often missing. Now, little top tip on the Y-axis. If you just turn your head this way, or of course, if you look at this on the smartphone, turn the phone, it says up is good. In this case, it's about sales. So I want to increase my sales, up is good. You may have a KPI where down is good, or a KPI where you want to reach an aim, a target, a nominal. So write it in there. If somebody now reads this graph, they go, okay, I can now understand all the basics. I can actually focus now on the message the graph itself is trying to tell me. Make sure you keep the X and the Y values simple. I try to stay to single or double digits. And if it's like thousands, millions, or billions, I will use a unit of measure to go with that. Keep the colors simple. You may have corporate colors for this, but keep them simple and keep them standard. Don't go for the rainbow. If you have dots, now dots can be very, very powerful, especially if you have a dashboard with lots of different things going on, and you need to attract the eye of the audience to those graphs where you want to draw the attention by having it red. You may have another one where you say, okay, these are greens, we can ignore them this week or this month. So using traffic lights can actually help with the visual management and the management of the meeting. And then the legend, the process owner, who owns this, who does the updating, a link to the operator definition, and then also explain what the targets means. And if you have a change button, if that's what rocks your boat, then add it in there. So, telling the story. The other thing I often see, I see lovely graphs, and then I say, okay, what happens here then? And they go, well, I don't know. Or the reverse. We're now in 2021, and this one person started to talk about what happened in March 2019. which like that's more like a year and a half ago. Why do we want to talk about that? Why is there not the narrative at that graph at this point? To show me what happened so I can read it at my leisure. We do not need to go back. So make sure the graph tells a clean story, easy to understand, and minimizes the opportunity for subjective interpretation. So the narrative should include the basics around the data, so source, assumptions, and how did you analyze it. And then the three golden questions, yeah? What's going well? What are the challenges? And what are we going to do about it? Now, here's the thing. A lot of times in performance review meetings, we don't tend to focus on the positive. We just want to talk about what didn't go well and what can we do different. But always start with our positive. So what's going well? Shadows, highlights. Now for the challenges, we can now use a slightly different model called the 3 C's. The first C being, what's my concern? What is not going well? Do we have a signal of assignable cause? Are we on target? And then what we're going to do about it, the cause or root cause, of course, and then the countermeasure. So the 3 C's, concern, cause, countermeasure. Now one of my colleagues says, okay, we want to add the 4th C of check. We've put the countermeasure in place. Now, did it actually work or not? So by all means do that. But if you now write this story down next to the graph, it can look like this. Now, what you see on this graph, of course, as well is that the first 3 are grayed out. Now, the reason why that is, I don't want to draw the attention too much to it. People can read it if they really need to. It's really about the story in the right bottom corner. So in this case, yeah, really simple run chart. Average sales 5.2 thousand per month, as low as 3, as high as 8, spread of 5. Okay, that gives me indication already about what my variation in this process is without resorting to a control chart. What are the challenges? Now I can see some peaks and troughs in the data. Perhaps I want to go and analyze why. Or point 2, I don't know what's going on. Is an up or downward trend. What I really want to do, I want to put into a control chart, see if it's stable and predictable. Is anything unusual going on? Keep monitoring sales, yeah? So tell that story to the audience. They are with you now. They understand exactly your thinking. It's there on paper. And then it goes here. Now, I mentioned Power BI a little bit because it's in the Office 365 suite. I know it can be an add-on and you may have to pay for it. There's something magical you can do in it called tooltips, which means the moment you hover over a button, a little cell on the graph, it can pop up the narrative. It's a very groovy way of having the story not there in your face, but the moment you start to look at the graph in detail, it pops up. So nice way of doing it. So, of course, we want to make it easy to interpret. Now, I'm going to show you 3 graphs. So back to the chat window, back to typing team. I'm going to show you 3 graphs, and the 3 graphs, what do you spot? Now, if you want to tell me something about graph 1, just put a 1 dot, and then what is wrong, graph 2, 2 dot, graph 3, 3 dot, and so forth. So here are the 3 graphs. I'm going to give you, Suze, 1 minute.
Yeah, we can give a minute, see what happens, see if what people notice. As Dennis says, anything you notice, pop into the chat. If you prefix it with, I want to talk about graph 2, just put 2 in and then whatever you notice. So so far we've got number 1, too much data. Number 1, wrong y-axis. Too much blank space, wrong axis. It's compact, but it's not legible. Colors too close to each other. Bad axis, no labels, poor labeling. So I'm guessing particularly that y-axis is probably what they're referring to. And then we're getting into some, number 2, indistinct colors. Then we're not got fans of the grayscale here.
You've spotted my cunning flaw here.
Is the legend too big? Is the legend overwhelming the actual data that we're trying to understand? Yes. What else have I got in here? The labels are not particularly useful. Okay, and then on to number 3, labels not useful, not visible. The colors are too similar, so I've got no idea really what it's trying to show here. something about scale, which of course is
Fantastic.
difficult. I think we've got some overwhelming numbers in here. No title on the axis, yes, on the y-axis, or the x-axis.
Do people like the stacked bar chart on the right? Can people read the stacking on the right hand side?
See, any messages? Do you put them in?
Too small, too much detail. Yeah, data
Number
legible.
2, distortion of contribution analysis by using a 3D pie chart.
Oh, yes.
Someone who knows her pie charts.
Oh, lovely, Rebecca. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
Yes, stacked pie charts do seem to be very popular.
Great. So yes, I think you spotted most of the all the flaws I designed into these trees. Yeah. So the left-hand side deviation, absolutely, y-axis is not useful. We have too much text going on. There's even text on the horizontal lines. Do we really need that? Now, data labels can be useful around charts to make it very easy for people to see a value, but make sure, of course, legible. Oh, by the way, thank you, Suze. For disappearing again. You could have stayed, that's fine.
That's okay.
So, yeah.
And thank you everyone for your contributions. It's really helpful to hear your feedback.
So the one in the middle, I did it on purpose. A part of the population has colorblindness, and sometimes we forget that when we choose our colors. And say, well, you see this slice here, the blue slice. Well, I see it like a light gray or dark gray color, so be aware. Now, by the way, I am going to talk about pie charts a little bit, and I'll give you a personal preference that I have a serious dislike to them. I try to avoid them at all costs. Doesn't mean they're bad or wrong. I just try to avoid them if possible. There's far more elegant graphs out there instead of a pie chart. And yeah, 3D, all nice and snazzy, but if I see 3D, I just get a bit of a shudder. Huh? Oh, thanks, Steve. That is brilliant suggestion there from Adobe as an online palette creation tool to check colorblindness. And then slide 3, of course, yeah, stack bar charts. This may sound odd, but the simple answer is do not go there. Don't go to stack bar chart. Is it really helping you to answer a question that you've got, or do you first need to do something to the bar chart to come at the answer? So I'll come back to that on the right. And yes, lots of things missing. So thank you for your feedback on what's wrong with these. And of course, use that now to go and analyze your own graphs. Yeah, these basic things. So here's a scenario. I have a monthly performance meeting. And the question that we always ask in this monthly performance meeting is how well are we doing during the last 4 weeks in these 5 different locations? And what we're going to look at is a number of invoices that get processed within 1 week. That's what we look for as a KPI to see how busy we are and make sure we get paid on time, of course. And this is what we publish. So Birmingham, beautiful Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, Qingdao, also a beautiful part of the world, Düsseldorf and Copenhagen. Now, I have had CEOs who can look at this and they go, bang, that's the highest, that's the lowest, here we have the growth. And this particular CEO, every month, people print out a massive pack for him called the White Book. And he used to go through it and he go, hey, what's wrong with that number there? But he had skilled himself in the art of interrogating tables. When I look at all of that, it's just, it all goes blank for me. So here are the 3 questions that the CEO wants to answer, yeah? Have we increased our number of invoice processed in these 4 weeks? 2, which location has processed the most invoices? And 3, what's the highest or lowest number of invoices we have processed? Yeah, some, very typical questions. Now, of course, I'm clever. I can do some Excel. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add some subtotals to this on the X and the Y. Because now I can read the X and the Y. And because there's only a few, I can scan this now. And I'm probably, like you can tell, the biggest and the smallest. But again, I have to spend time on this. Now, this, of course, is a simple 4x4 matrix. Now, imagine you've got 50 locations. and you've got 500,000 pieces of data. At the moment, I'm dealing with one data set which runs in the billions. And I don't have the time to go through 1 billion individual lines. Well, actually, it's even more. What is it? 6 billion, I think, at the moment. So it's huge, absolutely huge. So I will need to have a different way of interrogating these billion lines of data. So this could be one way of doing it, very quick and dirty. I've got a run chart on the left of the 4 different locations by week. And on the right-hand side, our favorite, not really, yeah, the stacked bar chart. But again, have a look at this. How does this help us to answer the 3 questions? So not any better. Now, how about this? What I'm going to do, I'm now going to do something which is called decomposition. I'm going to take all this data and I'm now going to decompose it by actually answering every single question individually. So rather than using one graph to try to answer all 3, I'm going to have 3 graphs, 1 per question. So have we increased our number of processes, invoices processed, location, and week. So here's the chart to answer number 1. And again, I've kept it simple. I've just stuck to a run chart. So have we increased? Now, what do you think, team? Have we increased, yes or no, in these last 4 weeks? What do you think?
So again, pop your answers into the chat.
I like it, Steve. Yeah, not enough evidence. 10 points, sir. Yeah, Kiara, Rebecca, Nick, nope, excellent. Yeah. How about the next one? Which location has processed the most invoices? Come on, then. Shout out the answer. Which one has the most? There we go.
Copenhagen, easy,
just like
quick.
that, yeah. Straightforward. And the lowest? Oh, forgive me for the misspelling of Qingdao. Should have been with the Q. I've just spotted it. Huh? But there we go, just like that. Highest, lowest. Yeah, Qingdao. Thank you, Dawn, for doing the spelling correctly. And then the last one, the highest, lowest number. So again, a Pareto chart, yeah, a rank ordered bar chart. Highest at the top, lowest at the bottom. So thank you very much. There we go. Yeah, 245, 101. 245 was in week 1 by Birmingham or Copenhagen, and the lowest 101 in Düsseldorf. So really simple, really quick. So think about this in your reports. Is it better to have decomposed graphs, decomposed data, and every single graph answers a specific question or not? So before we go to which graphs to use, let's just go to which graphs not to use. So simple question, but not a simple answer, which graph to use. Because it depends on 3 dimensions. First of all, what is the question you're trying to answer? Number 2, the type of data on the X and Y axis. Is it variables, attributes, ordinal data? Is it subjective data? And the third one, the understanding of the creator, the user, and the reader of the different types of graphs. So do they know what a control chart is? Do they know what a regression analysis is? As you probably notice up to this point, I've kept the graphs very simple, assuming a low level of understanding. Of course, the more versed they are in OE, in improvement, in process excellence, then the more complex you can make that graph, because we'll still tell them a meaningful story. But always think about this. But which ones to avoid? Now, these are the ones I avoid. First of all, pie charts. Have I mentioned pie charts before? Target lines on run charts. I try to stay away from them. Why? They tempt the user to react to single data points. What happened last month? Why was that above? Was that below? Yeah, that's called tampering. Stacked bar charts or stacked run charts, because as you saw, difficult to interpret. Graphs only show in very short window and average lines in isolation without showing the extremes within that time period. Now, there are some good pie charts, by the way. This is pie chart number 1, which I will gladly accept. pie I have eaten versus pie I have not eaten. The pyramid pie sky, which one is sky, the sunny side and the shaded side of the pyramid? Or the last one, the Pac-Man pie chart. If you remember Pac-Man, I can now tell how young you are, or if you're into retro games, yeah? Looks like Pac-Man, or doesn't look like Pac-Man. Now, joking aside, yeah, I stay away from them. Best pie charts ever, absolutely. Thank you, Haley. So here we have 3 times the same data. The one on the left is the rainbow chart. Now, nothing wrong with rainbows. I love rainbows. But there's a time and place for rainbow. It ain't in this bar chart here on the left. Yeah, one in the middle, it shows the same data as on the left, but only the average for that time period. Now, how useful is that? Of course, you tell me, well, you know what, we're going to combine 1 and 2 together, like you're thinking. And the last one, one person recently says, I don't care about what happened in the last 12 months, just show me the last 3 months. And I thought, all right then. I showed him a similar example to this. First of all, I showed him the example on the right-hand side. Let me just zoom in on this. So, okay, I show you these 3 bars. What's your prediction about next month? He said, well, I see a downward trend. Looks like in January we're going to be at 2. So, okay, great. I'm now going to show you the same data, but historically. It's the same data. I know the colors are slightly different. Here we still have November, December, January going down. But let's look at the year. What does it look like? So, ooh, looks like seasonality to me. Looks like we are going to be on an upward trend for Q1, then quiet Q2, Q3, and now we go to a peak in Q4. So exactly. So if you have Excel spreadsheets and somebody says we need to start again at the beginning of January of this year, say stop. Let's create a table with all the months from all the years. Let's look at all the available data. Why would you not? And also a beautiful gentleman I worked with today, as a matter of fact, who every month was presenting a snapshot. And therefore, they were only looking at what happened this month, completely ignoring what happened last month, the month before, the year before. So that meant every month he was redoing the graph from scratch. By having this historical data, we can still do the slicing and dicing, but now we can just focus on what's of importance to the question being asked. So historical data basically is the moral story and all the data. Like I say, target lines, I stay away from them. I'll give you the answer straight away. Go to capability analysis. Yeah, don't draw these lines. If you have been on our green belt course or in our online yellow belt, you probably see graphs like this appearing and how to do them properly. Huh? So here, of course, let's imagine that this is about the number of complaints in the pizza restaurant or food service. And of course, down is good. We want few complaints. Target, less than 72 complaints per year, which means 6.5 a month. That's quite a funny one, isn't it? What's half the complaints per month mean? But something happened in March and April. We went over it. Right. I need a report on my desk tomorrow. Tell me what you're going to do about it. Or this one, November. Same story. Tell me what to do about this point here. I have no idea. I wouldn't even know where to start answering that because I'm not looking at the total process of interest. So these graphs, I try to stay away from them because they're not telling a story that is useful. Which means, of course, that now you've all got in your head, go on then, Dennis, tell me which graphs are useful. So that's where we are right now. I could read your minds. And I've called this section, if this is the question, what's the answer? And you'll find that on the infographic you'll see on the very last slides today with the download link. So I've been going through some books. I've bought some books. Still need to invoice Rich for them, by the way, if he's listening. Storytelling with Data was one of them. Big book of dashboards. Fantastic. Learned an awful lot of them. But they were missing one thing. They were always showing me the tool. They were showing me the answer. What I would like you to do is to start with the question first. Brilliant books, by the way. I highly recommend them. But this is the addition. This is what I'm going to give to you for free. Not for £10 or £5 for free. Just download it off the link. If this is the question, of course, because else I'm going to go over what's called fishing. I've got lots of nice graphs in this software package. I'm just going to throw lots of graphs on you to show you how clever I am with the graphs, and then you choose the one that gives you the right answer. So I want to give you a little bit more intelligence around it. First of all, I'm going to start with what I call the exploratory graphs trilogy, according to Dennis. Yeah. If ever I'm given a data set, and the data set is in time series order, there's always three things I will do to that data set. Number one, stick it in the control chart. Because what I want to figure out, is my process stable and predictable? Is there something unusual going on? That's always question number one. No matter how big the data set, by the way, I just chuck it in. Even if it's more than 100 data points, just chuck it in there. Get that first feel. Then I start to apply sampling strategies to the data set. Number two, guess what? The histogram. What's the shape, center, and spread of my process? So where is the middle? Is it left skewed? Is it right skewed? Can I see any outliers? What's the mean? What's the median? So that's my graph number two. Now, the nice thing about that graph, of course, is I can have 1 billion data points. I will get an amazing histogram. I may not get a useful control chart, but I'll definitely get an amazing histogram. One of the biggest successes I had with that is when I looked at a bimodal data set, which wasn't obvious from the run chart, but became very obvious from the histogram. And we realized there was a secondary process that was having an undue influence on the result. So of course, as you then know, what you do is you split it out into these two data sets, realizing it came from two different processes. It led to completely different insight into what's going on, different decision making. So a histogram. And the third one, which is actually the end result of any improvement project, is the end result of any decision making that ought to be done by your senior leadership. Are we meeting the customer requirements? Is my process capable? Yeah, so that's a capability analysis. Now in this case, if you can interpret this, you see two vertical red lines, and the blue stuff should actually have been all within those two red lines. The fact that that is outside those two red lines means that there's something going on which is not desirable, i.e. we are not meeting customer requirements. This means now, if you look at this graph, of course, we have to squeeze in the end and shift it to the left. So this is my, my trilogy of graphs for exploratory purposes. There is a fourth one that I would add to this, which is the regression analysis, to see if there's any relationship between an explanatory and a results variable, predictor variable. Because that then can give me some other questions to ask. And I've been doing that recently quite a lot, regression analysis. Somehow in dashboards, people shy away from it. They just stick to the bar charts and the pie charts and run charts, but not the regression analysis or the scatter plots. So think through. Have you got in your data set some KPIs you think there may be a relationship between them, a causal relationship? Stick them in the scatter plot or regression analysis. So two more slides with, if this is the question, what's the answer? So this is that first one, our first edition, the regression analysis. Now, this is, of course, the classic. Came from a guy called Stephen Covey, where he was looking at ice cream sales versus shark attacks. And this has got a positive correlation, R squared 43. Of course, is it answering the question? The fact we have a correlation doesn't mean there's a causal relation. Yeah, so always bear that in mind. Thank you. Thank you, Florence. Yeah, the answer, of course, is no to that. Question 2, which category is the biggest, smallest? I'm sorry to disappoint those people like pi, Pareto, of course. Yeah, the rank ordered bar chart. In most data packages, it's very easy to put a filter on it and sort highest to lowest. Use that. So prepare that data. So when the graph then shows, it goes from right to left, high to low. Interestingly, a lot of graphs I see also in the media, they have the x-axis on alphabetical order. And then I have to go and figure out which of these alphabetical orders is the highest and lowest. I am actually interested in the y-axis, the value in the y-axis, yeah? So do it this way, really simple. And Chiara, I'm actually disappointed, Chiara. I thought you'd be quicker here, yeah? 736/608, huh? On this one. So 3 groovy control charts. In your business, I'm sure that you have targets. And if those targets vary every month, or people make forecasts every month, or you have seasonality, then of course, you may display it like this. And by the way, this is not the control chart yet, yeah? And now I have to go interpret, okay, what is that gap here? So I'm going to zoom in, yeah? I'm going to zoom in. Tell me what's going on here. Are we meeting the planned volume here or not? Can you see anything popping over? If so, which months are popping over in this data set? I go, is there anything unusual going on here? So of course, what I could do is turn to a deviation from aim control chart. Hey, things are popping out already. Now I can focus very quickly all of this. And by the way, on average, it looks like I'm 5 below my target. So I've got some more useful information. It also tells me that actually, based on this process, I'm never going to meet the target because my upper control limit. Oh no, actually I can. It's above the 0. I have a small chance that I will actually reach the target with this process at the moment. It's between roughly 0 and -11. Yeah. So I want to shift this upwards, don't I? That average should be 0. Second groovy control chart is the rare events. Now, if you have lost time incidents at work, or you have a priority 1 event, for example, in the IT area, or if you have a control center, or you have breakdowns of critical equipment, the hope is that these things happen rarely. Now, I could do it like that. So here I'm going to plot on my y-axis and the date when this happened. Now, good luck interpreting that. You know, what's the gap between them and how often did they happen? So what I could do, I could say, okay, you know what? I'm more clever. I'm going to tell you how many happened this month. So what? How's that helping you? So instead, of course, we can use my favorite control chart, and it is Friday afternoon, the G or T chart. In this case, it's something called the G chart. It's also called the mean time between failures chart, yeah, MTBF. Mean time between failures. Now, what this chart does, it tells me the average time between the priority 1 events, in this case, 30 days. And also it tells me, based on this data, what the upper control limit is. It says actually 300 days. So this is telling me this process is not very good. This is a bad process because, of course, down is good. Yeah, I want, no, hang on. Sure you're thinking the same as me? No, it's the wrong way around. Up is good. Something missing on the y-axis, isn't it? See, I now need to interpret this graph. If only the creator of this graph had written up is good after days between events. I'll have a quiet word with myself later on. So that's called a rare events chart. The G is if you have dates, and the T can be used if you have actually timed events. So let's say every day you have some unusual events that you want to plot in this way with actually hours and minutes. The last one I see a lot is when we have sampled data, say within a day or within a week, and I want to ask questions. What's the within my week or within my day variation and between weeks, between days variation? Now I could use a box plot, and you can do something similar, something clever in Excel with, what do they call, whiskers or arrow bars, and you can like kind of make a pseudo box plot. I have done that before. And you go, okay, what's going on here? And the little line in the middle is the median, by the way, and the blue bits is for 50% of your data set. So I can tell something of this, but why don't you use a groovy control chart instead? In this case, it's called an X bar and R chart. That tells me the within variation on the top, and the at the bottom, and the between variation at the top. So the average difference between days is 5. Would not be unusual if as low as 1 or as high as 9. And on the moving range, or the sample range in this case, it looks like that the average distance within a day is 7. And by the way, what I've just done, this is a good practice to get into. If you are using control charts at work, tell the story as if the audience knows nothing about control charts. Yeah, so let me just repeat that again on, just on the one on the right. So this is the story, yeah? We have data, we are sampling invoices in a queue, and we have 5 daily samples, yeah? 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and the end of the shift. Now we count those, and then we take the average. Now the average we plot in the top chart, and the range we plot in the bottom chart. Now the range means the difference between the highest and the lowest count within that day. That's what the range means. And what we see from the first chart is that on average, between the days, let me get it straight again, between the days, it looks like on average there's a difference of 5 in the number of sampled invoices. It would not be unusual as low as 1 or as high as 9. We do not see any signals on assignable course, so this process is stable and predictable. We can predict the future. If this process keeps working in the same way as it works now, it looks like the average will continue to be 5, as low as 1, as high as 9. The range chart contributes to this. There's no signal, so yes, they're stable and predictable. We do not have any of the Western Electric rules 1 or 5. We can predict the future. The range within the day is 7. Yeah, is between 4 and 14. So that would only be unusual if within a day one of the samples was more than 15 of invoice and queue. There's something unusual going on. Then we would start to investigate. I've now explained the graph without going into much geeky. I think I only use the word Western technology, Western Electric once. There's no signals. It's nothing unusual. Yeah. Keep it to the normal language. You can tell the story of this graph. You can explain a control chart to anybody in the organization using the words. So those are my 3 group of control charts. So that means we come to the end. I'm going to do a summary now. So first of all, summary of key points. Make sure the graph is simple as possible. 2, have clear KPI accountable and responsible for the updating. And the third one to add to that is if you have more graphs, somebody who looks after the organizing of all these graphs. 3, keep all the graphs in the same consistent look and feel, whatever that means to your organization. Have a story to accompany the graph. Now you start exploring this, of course, make sure you think about how do you share that learning and experience across your organization. Is anybody else in the organization doing the same? Power BI, for example, is quite new still to a lot of organizations. People do it from YouTube or other forms of learning. And you look at them, how they're doing this, and say, well, do you talk to each other? No, so build that network within your organization of people who do the same job as you. Make sure the graph is updated frequently, ideally point of need. So, I mean, I've got Power BI on this machine, and I can look at stuff instantly at this moment in time. Of course, that means the graph and the data needs to be updated. Make sure the graph answers the key question, the exam question. Yeah, does it actually provide a useful answer to drive insights? Now, offer to you all, if you are in doubt, if you have a graph, say, Dennis, I'm not sure about this graph. Yeah, reach out. I'm more than happy to help and have a look at what you're presenting today and see if there's a more elegant way, a better way, a different way that you can test with your audience. And
personally, I'd echo that, Dennis, because I've reached out to Dennis before now, not just about, is there a better way I can use this graph, but actually I don't believe the data that this graph is telling me. And Dennis has been brilliant at helping me use other graphs just to confirm that actually I was wrong and the graph was right. So thank you, Dennis.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So I think that brings us to the end of today's session. Before we close, obviously a big thank you, Dennis, for all of your insights today. Also, we'd just like to let everyone know, if you haven't heard before, we have launched our new version of our certified Lean Six Sigma online yellow belt. So it does cover graphs. So if you or any members of your team are interested in knowing a bit more and learning more about an introduction to improvement, it really is the perfect place to start. So do have a look on our website and book your place. Also, we are continuing to offer we are continuing our offer of providing people who attend our public training for Green Belt, Black Belt, and for Master Black Belt with an iPad, as well as all of the digital materials that you receive. The reason for this is to give you an extra device that you can use during training. So please do take advantage of that and look forward to seeing you on our public soon. Finally, we are going to also show you the, include the link in the chat for the infographic at the end, but we're also going to be issuing you our Voice the Customer survey, and from there we'd really be grateful for any feedback you can share with us, both on today's session, what we can do well, more of what we did do well, and also any suggestions that you've got for future topics. So I think that brings us to the end of today's webinar, apart from to say we will send you this recording and the infographic. You can get it now if you go to the link that's on your screen, and you can download it. So from me, from Dennis, and from everyone at PMI, we wish you a very safe and relaxing weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, enjoy it. So thank you from me as well. And you see there the infographic, very, very groovy indeed. So go to our Knowledge Hub. I will stick links on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. So thank you, Suze, for hosting me today.
It's a pleasure. Great to work with you, Dennis.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.